Phoenix Fire Department safety office, and was a safety officer for Phoenix Fire on 3 different occasions. I worked in a variety of areas in Phoenix. I chaired the Safety and Health Committee, which is now a section of the I-Chiefs. And I've been involved, as Bill said, with the Institution of Fire Engineers for a number of years. And most recently in 2019-20, I served as the international president of the international organization. So I've been very fortunate. I've been blessed. I've gotten to do a lot of things. I'm still active with NFPA. I've been on the PPE, Protective Clothing Equipment Project at NFPA since 1984. I'm still on the correlating committee, and I still serve on electronic safety equipment, a committee that I spent 10 years as the chair of. So I've been able to do some things. I currently teach a PPE technician class. My primary audience in that is the U.S. Air Force, and I've been privileged to visit a number of bases and do those classes. So that's my background, which is really only interesting. But Bill, that's what you asked for. So there it all is. And like I said, I have truly been blessed along the way. I got to work for Chief Alan Brunacini. When I first went to work for him, he was a captain and training chief, assistant chief, and then the greatest fire chief a person could ever work for. Bill Killen and I have known each other for a whole lot of years, and because of my relationship with Chief Brunacini, I got to hang out with people that were way above my pay grade when I was a lot younger in the fire service. So I appreciate those opportunities, and I think I learned a couple of things along the way, and have tried to apply those as I've worked through my fire service career. Bill asked me to talk about firefighter PPE, and I've got a program I put together just kind of to keep us on track, so it's not rambling. Certainly feel free to interrupt me at any time, ask any questions. I may or may not know the answer, but I'll certainly try. And if I don't know the answer, rather than make something up, I will tell you I don't know the answer. So Bill, I'm gonna try and share my screen here and see if we can make that work. So we should have that up. Let me see if I can minimize this other box over here. There we go, because it's covering up my slides right now. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. Thanks for taking your time in the evening to have a discussion. I've got to make the slides change, which doesn't seem to be. Well, that's interesting. Let's go back and try that a different way. Okay, we're going to try and go back to full screen and see if we can. There we go. Okay. So certainly all of you probably know this, but I thought I'd start with the basics. Is what are we talking about? Because when COVID came around, we heard an awful lot about PPE, and that's not what we're talking about today. We heard an awful lot about the various masks and things like that, and rubber gloves and all of those things that we needed. And while if firefighters are responding to medical calls, that's important PPE. In fact, it's very important PPE. But we're talking about structural firefighting gear, and very basic. And it's a helmet, a hood, coat, trousers, gloves, footwear are the basics of that. But in order to engage in structural firefighting, we're going to add a few more things to that. We're going to add the self-contained breathing apparatus. We're going to add the tools of the trade, which would be many times referred to as irons, and that's an axe and a Halligan bar. They may add a power saw. They may add other pieces of equipment. But in order to do the job of structural firefighting, these are the absolute things that we have to have. We have to have all of that gear in order to protect us from heat, to protect us from smoke. The SCBA is going to protect our lungs from smoke. And nowadays we'll talk about this at our next meeting. Nowadays we're also looking at protecting ourselves from the products of combustion. We have a far better understanding of that, and the products of combustion in fires today are much more hazardous than they were when I started in the fire service in 1967. So what the heck does all this cost? Well, when we add it all up, including an SCBA and a radio, we're at about $12,000, and this is a moving target for all of this. If you're doing consortium buying, where you're buying as a county, or you're hooked up with other cities, or you're able to tack on to the bid of a larger community, many times that's available. You can bring these costs down a little bit, but this is what it's going to cost to equip a firefighter to safely operate at a structural fire. Was that a question?
Bruce, I was going to make a note. If I unmute this thing, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're going to have to speak up just a little bit, Bill.
Okay. Bruce, one of the questions I have is when we talk about the life cycle of PPE and the standards, we talk about it goes out of date. Which of these components really goes out of date, and what's the story behind that, if you would?
Okay. You're getting a little ahead of me, which was part of next week's discussion, but let's just talk about that briefly. Is NFPA compliant protective clothing, which is going to be everything on here except the SCBA, the flashlight, the pager, and the radio. So all of the stuff preceding that has a 10-year life cycle. Now, that 10-year life cycle is based on a number of things. One is that's 2 editions of an NFPA standard where you're looking to make improvements in the gear. It's 10 years worth of technology changes. It's 10 years of garment life, where if we're looking at garments that are in use, is they are exposed to UV light, they're exposed to the products of combustion, they should be getting a complete laundering no less than twice a year, and after every significant exposure to products of combustion. So when you look at the wear and tear on the fabrics, you look at how the fabrics are deteriorating. The fabrics that are used today contain a lot of Kevlar. Kevlar is really, really sensitive to UV light. So exposure to sunlight, exposure to fluorescent light, and we see this in fire stations an awful lot where we have fluorescent lighting in the gear rooms. And sorry about that. And that's going to deteriorate the gear as well. So that's where that 10-year, there was a lot of discussion. There's still some ongoing discussions about the 10-year service life. You'll have people that say, well, you know, look, this has not been used. Well, NFPA standards are written, and it's affecting the fire service across the entire country. So the process of putting those standards together and looking at what is our safest approach is where the 10 years came from. In active fire departments, and there are some very active volunteer departments as well as very active career departments. They're replacing gear on a 3 and 4 year cycle because they're wearing the gear out. Other places, and I've had that thrown at me a number of times and say, you know, look at this, tell me why I should replace this. And the answer is working within a standards process, a consensus process that we came up with 10 years is erring on the side of safety for the firefighter.
Okay, thank you, Bruce. I didn't mean to get too far off track.
No, not at all. And we can certainly talk about that some more when we get into some specific NFPA standards, which is what I'm looking to do for the next session. Now it's only been just a very short time ago that, as I recall, Tennessee had some very active wildfires. And certainly you had a lot of people that looked like this that were spending time in and around your communities. This is a shot from the Forest Service, but that looks at the cost of outfitting wildland gear. When I went to Texas, the first time we went to a significant wildland fire and I saw firefighters in structural gear attacking wildland fires, I said, this has got to stop. And I went after the money, and we actually bought gear from California Prison Industries and outfitted all of our members with wildland gear to respond to those incidents. Now in Texas, you get a lot of grass fires, which can be a very, very, very fast moving fire, and you need to be properly protected from it. But moving them out of structural gear and into proper wildland gear to deal with those kinds of fires. California, of course, we dealt with wildland. We had vehicles that were typed for wildland. We had firefighters that were typed for all types of wildland positions. And when they asked if I was going to get my qualifications and that, I told them I couldn't live long enough and that I would stay in town and handle any structure fires while they went out and dealt with wildland. But that's another aspect, is if you deal with wildland, the firefighters have to have the proper clothing and equipment to protect themselves from that. Having firefighters go out and do wildland in structural firefighting is just asking for injuries and problems. So the other thing, and you all probably know this as well as anyone, is that Tennessee is an OSHA state plan state. And one of the things that means is that Tennessee has to have an OSHA plan that is at least as stringent as the federal plan. So that, and it also means that everyone in municipal service is covered. And you can get into some significant discussions about whether or not volunteers are covered. But if you sort through that, and this is I'm not an attorney, I don't claim to be an attorney, but if you sort through that, you will find that one way or another, they are in fact covered by OSHA. So when we look at OSHA, it's applicable to all private sector workers, most all federal agencies, exclusions to allow other federal safety regulations such as the EPA. Section 19 of the OSH Act gets into the particulars of that, and it was not applicable except where the state has adopted a state OSHA plan, and then it is applicable to all state and local government agencies. And you probably all knew this. So when we go back and we look at the creation of the OSHA Act, the Occupational Safety and Health Act, that's what created OSHA is the agency. There's 34 section. It gave the authority to create regulations, and the most significant of those, frequently referred to as the silver bullet, is Section 5. Shall furnish each of the employees employment and a place of employment which are free from recognized hazards that are causing or likely to cause death, serious injury, physical harm to the employee. This is one that an OSHA inspector can use in the absence of a defined regulation, but it's also the mandate that says you shall protect your employees. Now, within OSHA looks at three different levels. Is that when we look at protecting employees from a hazard, we look at can we do that administratively? Well, going to fires, we're not going to do it administratively. Can we do it through engineering? Again, going to fires, we're not going to engineer the safety in that. So what in OSHA regulations is the last line of defense, PPE, is the first line of defense for us. This is more reiteration of the general duty clause, and where we recognize the hazard. We know that firefighting is likely to cause death or serious injury. The feasible and useful method to protect us from that hazard is PPE, and we applied it. We apply that for our predictable hazards. And that's all in the OSH Act. It's Section 6 of the Occupational Safety and Health Standards. Pretty much the OSHA regulations are program based. They're looking at a compliance approach to safety. And we certainly, some of you in your jobs deal with confined space or respiratory or hazardous waste operations, bloodborne pathogens, the regulations for lockout, tagout, all of those things. It's not uncommon for us to be dealing with in other jobs, and we deal with the OSHA regulations that are there, but they also are applicable to us in firefighting. So when we look at how they're applied, the first thing they're going to use is, are there regulations specific in OSHA? The next is where we go to our vertical standards, is the national consensus standards. NFPA would fall into that national consensus standard. Are there proprietary standards? Is there an ANSI standard that is applicable and can be utilized by OSHA? What are the industry accepted practices? What are the best practices? And failing all of those, then they will apply the general duty clause to that. As I mentioned a moment ago, they're either horizontal, applied to all industries. 29 CFR 1910 general industry is the OSHA regulation that's applied to the fire service. We do use a little bit from construction when you look at us, particularly during overhaul operations where we are deconstructing a building. Some of 1926 would apply, which is the construction standard. The vertical standards, again, the NFPA standards, of which we have an awful lot of those that apply to us as well. The good news is that during emergency operations, OSHA really doesn't mess with us very much. There are some specifics, such as 2 in, 2 out, which is in the respiratory standard, that they will enforce based on emergency activities. But by and large, we can do an awful lot without being under close scrutiny by OSHA or cited by OSHA, unless we injure or are unfortunate enough to have someone who's killed, and then OSHA is going to look at that. But our training activities, our non-emergency activities, are all subject to the OSHA regulations. And when we teach this, I teach a class for the fire department safety officers, which is the health safety officer. And when we talk about this, we'll frequently hear, but we're the fire department. Well, okay, but you're still not exempt. We use NFPA. NFPA doesn't replace the OSHA regulations. So those are things, and that all ties back to our requirement to have proper PPE and to have the necessary PPE to protect our people. When we look at training and our non-emergency activities, all of these apply, whether we're dealing with confined spaces, our hazard communication, which is one of the most frequently cited things under OSHA, is not having the HAZCOM materials taught or available in the fire station. Certainly fall protection. We see all over the country roof props for roof ventilation that are utilized in training that don't have any kind of fall protection utilized. Some of the most significant injuries that have occurred in firefighter bailout training, showing firefighters how to get out of upper floors using a rope, is when you're doing that in training, it requires a safety rope. Doing that without a safety rope has resulted in some career-ending injuries for a number of firefighters in both volunteer and career service. And these are some of our examples where other regulations may come into play. Asbestos is one, the ADHERA standards in asbestos, the EPA standards. So the other, and this is that vertical standard, is the NFPA standards. And when we were talking about the service life, is all NFPA standards are revised and updated between 3 and 5 years. So this this process takes 2 to 3 years to complete, and that's the standard cycle that it's in. Now, NFPA is currently combining a bunch of standards. They're actually reworking their numbering system and combining the standards. So some of these are going to go a little bit longer, and a couple of them have been done in a little bit shorter cycle. It is a consensus standard, and it has to have a balance of interests. When I'm out in the world, I hear all the time that, it's just the manufacturers and they're just shoving this stuff down our throat. That's not the case. The committees have to be balanced. There can be no more than 30 voting members, and no more than 1/3 from any single interest category. So you do have a significant balance within that committee process as you go through it. And you get people from all over the country, from all different sizes of departments. And the other thing is that in order to participate in the NFPA process, you don't have to be a member of the NFPA. You do not have to be on the committee. You can follow what's going on with a committee without being a member of that committee. It requires a little bit of education on how to do it, but it's certainly something that's possible, and we do have people that do that. So within the NFPA standards, we have product standards, which are directed at how a product is manufactured, and whether that's our structural proximity PPE, our station uniforms, fire apparatus, has standards for the different types of fire apparatus, for fire hose, for the hardware that's utilized. Is we have NFPA standards, and this is how that product is put together. And then we have user standards, and the most well-known of those, of course, is NFPA 1500, which is the occupational safety and health standard for fire and emergency services. The other one you see on the slide there is 1521, which is the health safety officer and the incident safety officer standard. But we will also, when we next talk, we'll talk in detail about the selection, care, and maintenance standards. NFPA 1851 is the one that's probably the most concern to firefighters, because it's how we take care of our structural PPE, what the requirements are for washing, repairing, very specific requirements on an organization that is maintaining firefighter PPE. If they're washing it and cleaning it for a department, if they're repairing it, there are some very specific requirements on those. And knowing that you're going to someone that has certified under that standard is really important. So they fall under the national consensus standards as far as OSHA is concerned, and the NFPA standards can be used to comply with OSHA regulations with the hazard-based programs, but they can't be used in lieu of the OSHA regulations. They don't address all of the requirements identified in the OSHA regulations, and we still go back to 29 CFR 1910, our general industry standard, and the others that are referenced as applicable to fire service in dealing with those. So I'm going to stop the share here. And I hope I didn't bore anyone to tears with that discussion, but it goes to the point of why we have to outfit firefighters in appropriate PPE. It goes to the requirements for doing that, and what the legal requirements and the legal ramifications are. We still see around the country, it's taken a number of years of work, NFPA actually took the lead on it, is doing an audit of how many fire departments we had in this country. And 15 years ago, we didn't know. We honestly did not know how many fire departments we had. The federal reporting system, we had fire departments that were not engaged in the reporting system. Now, one of the things that came about is the Fed said in order to apply for the grants, assistance to fire service grants to get equipment, to get SCBAs, that you had to be in the federal reporting system. Is your department had to have an identifier number and had to be a part of that system in order to get those grants. That caused the numbers to go up considerably. We suspect there are still fire departments out there where it's just some folks that say, if there's a fire, we're going to come and we're going to do the best we can with what we've got. Bruno used to say a brush truck and a bucket. And I in no means disrespect that, but is that a fire department? Some folks that just come together if there's an emergency, are they a fire department? Are their neighbors helping neighbors, which is the truest form of being sure that you're helping your fellow man. But if you have an organized fire department, there are some rules and regulations that have to be met, and there's equipment that has to be provided to those firefighters. Questions, discussion, concerns? A hush falls over the crowd. Bill?
Well, I had a couple of questions, and I should have wrote them down, but I was following along pretty well. I'm glad you covered the process on the NFPA committee makeup, because there are a lot of folks that really didn't understand it or don't understand it. Everybody who has a dog in the fight has an opportunity to have a representative on NFPA committees to ensure that their views are considered.
Yes, sir. Now, that doesn't mean that if you say, well, I'm going to join an NFPA committee and throw in an application today, that you're going to get accepted to that committee, because the category that you're in may be full. If you look at users, it may be that it's full. A manufacturer wanting to be on it, same thing. I know a couple of manufacturers that grouse all the time because they've had applications in for over 10 years and can't get on the committee because it would put the numbers out of balance.
Yeah.
I had a question about having, you had pagers and radios in your pricing.
Yes, sir.
That seems like more of an either or situation for a lot of places. If you're a volunteer department, you're using pagers, you may not have individual radios for every member, maybe individual radios for your truck. And if you're a career department, you probably don't have pagers at all.
And technology has changed that a lot too. Is you can receive pages over your telephone today, and I know there's a lot of organizations that do that. I also always caution people that the telephone companies take their systems down in the middle of the night to do maintenance. My son was an engineer for Verizon, and we shared some of those stories. But you are correct, and I say whatever works for you best locally with that. There's also some technology out there, a company named I Am Responding, which provides information, and it uses cellular technology to let the incident commander know who's coming. So there's a lot of options to that. Certainly, when I picked up that slide, Those are all things that you might have on a firefighter, but the critical things were all above that. The radio and pager, that's up to you locally. There's no requirement for you to have those.
I will say I've done wildland firefighting in full structural gear in Colorado and in Virginia.
It's not fun.
Now, one of them put me in the hospital or ER for a while. Actually, both of them did, both states, overheating.
Well, you don't forget those things. My second fire, first major fire, we traveled 62 miles one way in a brush truck to get to the scene. And like a lot of smart young 16-year-olds, I thought I knew a whole lot. I'd had some training. It's hot, and I took off that coat, and my shirt was just soaking sweat. And in moving some stuff with a rake, I backed up to a white, hot sapling. And thank God the shirt was wet, and I put the coat back on. But yeah, that's one of the great improvements was the development of wildland firefighting PPE. You know, we have on the panel here with us, Bruce. Hal is a law enforcement officer with a lot of background in rescue and life-saving groups and fire. Keith Gibson is a retired high school principal and an elected official. Chief Fugit is a volunteer fire chief and works in an industry where he's heavily engaged with OSHA training. I don't know who's on the extra phone. And Jamie Miller is our EMA director, and I believe Jamie's got a broad background in emergency medicine. But I'm going to back off and see if there's other comments or questions. Particularly wanted to do this discussion with one of our elected officials, and so I'll back off and let some other folks come up with some questions or comments.
I'm going to ask Hal just a quick question. Are you in any relationship to Butch Whedon out of Montana?
I'm not aware of having any relations in Montana, but anything's possible.
Okay.
Not a lot of us, and there's a fair percentage of us who don't look like me.
He was the director of state fire training for a number of years, so that's why I asked the question. He's passed on, but he's really good guy.
What's his real first name?
You know, I only knew him by Butch.
I'll have to go back. I'll have to go back and look, but Butch was from Montgomery County, Maryland, and when I met Butch, he was a fire chief in a little city west of Charlottesville in Albemarle County. And he went on out to Montana, and he said that he died and gone to heaven. He was never moving anywhere else again.
And Albemarle County is a pretty nice place.
Yes, sir, it is.
Commissioner Gibson, did we answer questions for you, or did we provide information that was useful?
Yes, sir, you have. This is overwhelming to me. I have no background at all in fire protection like this. You know, I've been sitting, we're looking at trying to do some funding. You know, we're having issues in the county about radios for firefighters. You know, like Bill said earlier, most of our firefighters are, you know, volunteers, and they have to do a lot of on raising the money. The county does put so much money, but of course, and Bill will tell you, it's not enough. And this is why I'm interested in this. You know, with all this COVID money that's coming down, I'm hoping that we can get enough money to help, you know, outfit with some, you know, all the different volunteers. Had no idea what it would cost. And, you know, that's an eye opener to me when I took a picture of it with my phone. So I'll know, you know, have a lot better idea how much it is going to cost per person to outfit, because some of the fire chiefs talk about their equipment is not, you know, is either out of date or about to go out of date, and they're needing more. And, you know, COVID has prevented them from doing fundraising. And trying to come up with stuff. So this has been very informative for me. Again, overwhelming, but informative.
And I'm hoping that Shane Ray will be with us next time. In fact, I'm hoping that Shane will take a bit of the lead on it, because he is from Tennessee, and he has been a fire chief. He's been a public official, and really has a good handle on some of the things that I probably do not, that apply to you locally. The other thing that Shane was very successful when he was fire chief was the ability to engage in obtaining some of those federal grants that are available.
See, our problem about grants like this, the different groups are spread out so far. They're not under one umbrella, and sometimes they don't. And I hate to say this, they don't seem like they get along with each other enough where they couldn't go after one big grant. You know, I don't know if that's even be feasible or not, but
well, that's one of the areas where you're able, whenever you're able to do grants that apply to multiple jurisdictions. In the last several grant cycles, those have done very well in the awards.
but the next problem will be finding somebody to write the grant.
I don't know. There's this guy that's in the upper left corner of my screen that has a big fire truck behind him that probably knows some people who know some people.
I'd say you're probably correct on that one.
Mr. Hawkins, from Emergency Management. Is there anything that I didn't cover that I should have covered that is helpful?
This Jamie, the EMA director, no, the knowledge was very thorough. Hopefully, some of this COVID money can be used to secure those items as far as personal protective equipment. The next meeting on that will be the 5th at 6 p.m. for the ones on here from Hawkins County.
Yeah, yes, sir. And I think they moved that back to 7 p.m. for you guys, because I had a doctor's appointment that I couldn't change.
Yeah, we changed that meeting next week to 7 p.m. And unfortunately, I know at least 2, and I think maybe 3 county commissioners are on that ad hoc committee that are meeting right now and will be meeting next week. That's why I'm recording this for that particular session. And you mentioned grant writer. I can't call his name right now. It's not coming in. Thing. Shane Ray just sent me a text message, and I told him it's going on now. IAFF, the International Association of Firefighters, had a full-time grant employee who retired and went off on his own. And he's gotten millions of dollars for College Park Fire Department, volunteer fire department. And he and I have talked several times and exchanged information. And we had hoped to get some money in our budget this year from the county where we could have engaged him to do some full-time work for us and getting some grants.
And there are some folks out there that are very talented grant writers that some of them work for whiskey or sugar, one or the other. And I mean cakes and cookies when I'm referring to sugar, by the way. Fire chief.
You never ate your lunch?
Chief Fugate, is there anything that we can?
Well, we actually have some folks here in the county that have been very successful on their grant writing. It's been a few years back, but Goshen Valley, we brought back somewhere in the neighborhood of $500,000. We were successful in 4 out of 6 grants for PPE, SCBA, apparatus. Got to have the time to do it. You've got to have the time to do research, do the demographics, put together the proposal, match the proposal with what the AFG is looking accomplish with the program, and you can be successful on these grants. However, I like the statement that you made that the regional grants are faring much better now than the individual department grants. If we could write a grant for the entire county for PPE or SCBA, I feel quite certain with the population of the county, the call volume, that we would be more successful in approaching it in that manner than in trying to approach it by the individual departments applying for these grants. And even if we hire a grant writer to do this, I think we would be more successful.
I agree, sir. I think that what we've seen over the last probably 3 grant cycles is that the folks that have submitted regional grants have certainly fared much better than the individual grants.
Shane just texted me. He may try and come on with us. The extra phone is the chairman of our county commissioner, Mike Harrell. And Mike texted me, said he's in our meeting, but says where he is, he can't hear good. Mike, can you hear us now? How's things coming through? Well, he's hearing part of things. One of the things I'll work on is between now and next week, I'm going to do little drills and see if I can help some of our county commissioners get a better connection.
Okay.
It must be their radio system up there. Sorry, Bill, I had to say that.
I missed that, Harold. I missed that.
So they must be using your radio system up there. You hear it that time?
Yeah, I did. I'm gonna be quiet.
Well, for everybody that doesn't know me, I don't live in Hawkins County anymore and haven't in years. So it's not, I'm just pushing the buttons there.
Well, gentlemen, it's certainly been a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to take your time. It's my intention next week to get into the NFPA standards, looking at the care and maintenance in particular on PPE. Some of the things that we're doing and are a part of looking at how to keep firefighters healthy. And that's something else that can really be done on a regional basis. And there's a couple of folks that have been, I don't know whether you've got Home Depot or Lowe's in your area, but some fire departments have been very successful at getting them to make substantial donations towards preliminary decontamination equipment, which is buckets and hoses and scrub brushes. And they have outfitted entire fire departments through the local grants that they're able to administer. Walmart is another one that's a place to go for looking at those kinds of things. So I'll bring some of that to the table next week. And Bill, if we can, if Shane Ray can join early next week and perhaps talk a little bit specifically about Tennessee in terms of local politics and successes with grants, and perhaps other places where that can be looked at locally.
Shane texted me a couple of things, and apparently I sent him his invitation to this at the National Fire Sprinkler email address, and he just sent me a different one, so I forwarded it to him. I don't know if he may come on, but if you got a few minutes, Bruce, to hang with us.
Sure.
And maybe he'll come online. I just would like to go back to some of the discussion. What are some of the situations that we would have to deal with for the use of non-compliant PPE? I'm primarily thinking about structural firefighting PPE.
Well, Bill, is non-compliant is non-compliant. That's I have a couple of hats there, and there's not one that has a solution. You know, my safety officer hat I'm also a general industry, OSHA general industry instructor, and a health safety officer instructor. And you know, sometimes you do with what you have and you try not to get caught. But one of the areas where OSHA has been active, usually on a complaint basis, has been for non-compliant PPE.
Any idea what some of the results or repercussions have been for non-compliant PPE?
Well, when OSHA comes in and cites you, there's an appeals process. There's a process you can go through, but ultimately you can be looking at fines that are in the thousands of dollars, many thousands of dollars, for being non-compliant. Now the good news is that in getting someone that is very, very conversant with OSHA to help you with that, and don't admit guilt, and sit down in the meeting and try and negotiate with OSHA that instead of paying a fine to the feds or to the state, that money would go towards the acquisition of PPE. But I'm not going to do this really well off the top of my head, but in COVID, there hasn't been much activity at all. Pre-COVID, and I don't remember whether it was North Carolina or South Carolina, but a department took a pretty huge fine for non-compliant PPE. That was on a complaint that probably originated with the firefighters local career fire department, but it was a fairly substantial fine.
My concern is that it's like everything else when they go for whoever has the deepest pockets. And looking at our situation here, we've got 8 volunteer fire departments, all volunteer, all operating on shoestrings. Who would they go after? The department or the chief or the president or the treasurer?
Well,
all the above.
When you say you have 8 volunteer departments, does the county give them money?
In the form of a donation, yes.
You need legal help with that, but that can go to, and we're talking employee under OSHA, not employee under FLSA. But employee under OSHA tends to be a little bit looser structured, and you can get to where OSHA considers the county as an employer.
That could be a
if they are an independent fire company, they are also they are, I'm sure they're chartered in some manner.
Yes.
It's a 501c3 or whatever. So they are a company and they still fall under OSHA. You don't get to dodge OSHA in that. There's a way to get there.
Well, bottom line, folks, ignorance of the law is no defense in any situation. You know, we're aware of it. The county's aware of it. The fire chiefs are aware of it, that we fall under TOSHA in the state of Tennessee. And chances of them coming out short of a firefighter filing a complaint with TOSHA, they don't have the inspectors to send out to all the volunteer fire departments in the state to do an audit or an inspection. However, if someone is injured, they will be there. OSHA's going to be there, and that's when the citation booklet will come out. We know that. If someone's injured, it's going to be a bad day in the county. That's my perspective.
And Chief, I would have to say that's a very accurate perspective.
I'd like to ask a question now. And maybe Chief Fugit could answer this. Again, I told you I don't have a lot of experience at all. in this. How many sets of PPE equipment do you need per fire station, per volunteer group?
Right now, Keith, Goshen Valley, we could probably get by with what we have that is not compliant, but it's usable for those firefighters that aren't going to be in an IDLH atmosphere. These outside firefighters, the apparatus drivers, we could probably get by with 10 to 12 sets.
Okay. Do you think that would be good for, pretty much the same for everybody?
You
Every
pretty much
volunteer?
you pretty much have a dozen firefighters in each department that do respond, roughly. Some maybe a little less, some maybe a few more.
Do they keep this equipment with them, or is that at the station, or how does that work?
The way Goshen Valley does it, due to the fact that they are volunteer, that sometimes they do have to respond from home, they have to respond in POVs. They're issued, the last grant that we got for PPE, they were issued a bag to carry their gear in, and they kept their gear with them. And we did a quarterly inspection on their turnout gear. It's their responsibility to take care of it, to launder it. We've got an extractor at Goshen Valley. We launder ours after each fire call. That's each firefighter's responsibility to take care of their turnout gear, their SCBA face piece. But for most of my members, they carry the gear with them.
Okay, I know in the city of Churchill, our employees are the firefighters. They have a few volunteers. I know as far as police officers, I think they keep theirs in their cruiser. They take their cruisers home. I'm not sure about people in the street department, and I'm not sure what each one of them does. But I'm not real familiar with the county, the other agencies. So that's the reason I was asking about this, because, I've had the thought, and I've said a long time ago on some of this COVID money, that I'd like to see that the county could take part of this money and try to outfit so many, and I don't know how many, and that's the reason I asked this question. If
Right.
If we could come up with, seeing the price, $12,000 per person, if we could come out, 7, 8 sets, complete sets, and I'm thinking air tanks and everything, how beneficial would that be?
Oh, it'd be extremely beneficial. And Bill, I hope the recording is successful, because all of our elected officials really need to see and understand this, and understand the responsibility and the liability that's being placed on our officers in the departments in allowing our employees, and they are employees, even though they volunteer, they're considered employees, but how liable this makes us in allowing them to use substandard gear or gear that's non-compliant. We fall under the same regulations, we fall under the same consensus standards as any other municipal department in the state of Tennessee, in the country for that matter. We have to meet those same standards when it comes to protecting our employees. So I think it's vitally important that they understand this. First and foremost, let's protect our employees. And there was some questions come up between myself and a couple other fire chiefs about radios, communications. Yeah, that's a big problem in Hawkins County, communications. However, as long as I've got 2 radios or 3 radios on the fire scene, one for the IC so they can talk to dispatch, and a couple for entry and a couple for outside operations people, I'm good. My big concern right now is protecting my employees with the appropriate PPE. That's my number one priority at Goshen Valley. I've got 15 air bottles that are out of date. Now, as long as we're filling those bottles ourselves, nothing happens, we're probably going to be okay. But let one of my firefighters get injured in a fire, they're going to come in and inspect everything. And when they see that I'm using out of date SCBA, then guess where I'm going? More than likely, I may have a little trip to a gated community, because knowing it and allowing it to continue to occur, that's gross negligence. That's not just negligence on my part, that's gross negligence, because I've allowed my employees to use substandard gear.
Tony, can those bottles be reconditioned in any way? Again, I'm speaking out of ignorance because I don't know much about this.
The bottles that we have, Mr. Gibson, are carbon fiber bottles. They've got a 15-year shelf life. Now there's a couple of companies in the country, you can send them out, they can recondition them, put a new valve in them, put new O-ring, and recertify them for another 15 years. However, those bottles have to go back every 5 years to that same company to be inspected and a hydrostatic test done on them.
Chief, I believe that composite cylinders have to be hydrostatic every 3 years.
The ones we have, they told us 5. We had them done every 5 years.
Okay. I was just researching that for another project I'm doing, and it's a mess in determining the correct. There's about 8 different OSHA letters, and like I said, and DOT is involved, is the primary. So it's truly a mess. But the service life, Commissioner, is 15 years. Service life on composite cylinders, and there's, as the chief indicates, there's the ability to have those reconditioned, but you look at reconditioning costs versus new cylinder cost, and they get pretty close together.
There's really, Bruce, the checking that I've done, there's not a whole lot of difference between the cost of new cylinder and the cost of having them reconditioned. If you take into consideration of having to ship these cylinders to halfway across the country to get them done and pay shipping coming back, you can just about buy a new cylinder for what you'll pay for reconditioning.
Right. And that's what I'm finding. Like I said, I'm involved in researching that for another project I'm working on. And yeah, I was pulling my hair out earlier today, trying to bring it all together.
Well, the rationale, earlier this year, we run several Zoom conference training sessions. Had Tom Wright on. I don't know if you remember Tom Wright from the U.S. Fire Administration, who initially got the fire incident reporting system started back years ago with Phil Shaneman. Had Tom Wright on. We had a session with Billy Goldfeder. We've had a number of people on to discuss different things with the chiefs, and this is the first one we put together, Bruce, where we could have some of our elected officials. I'm grateful that we do have the chairman of our commission on here with Commissioner Gibson, who also wears a second hat as a city alderman. Hopefully we can get more people involved. That's why we're recording it. And I'm glad that our EMA director came on and joined us as well, because he gets a lot of questions from the commissioners from time to time. And he's the full-time emergency services employee in the county. The rest of them are volunteers. But I don't think that a lot of folks realize the magnitude and the exposure, the liability that we're exposed to for operating with substandard equipment.
And, you know, Commissioner, there's no, it's not lost that you have to figure out how to fund all of the operations. Chief Fugate and I have both been through preparing budgets and trying to justify things and trying to get the money. So that's, I don't think that's lost on any of us. One of the critical things about firefighter PPE is, as I mentioned just very lightly earlier, is that today's fires are very, very different, and having proper PPE and then the ability to properly clean that PPE and maintain it is also a critical aspect of keeping our firefighters healthy, is reducing their exposure to the carcinogens that are produced in what we see in structure fires today. The amount of plastics that are in a home today, the changes in conditions that we are facing on arrival that are significantly different than what they were years ago, are things that our firefighters are facing every single day across the country. And while, in some areas of the country, they may only see a working structure fire every now and then, you still have to be properly prepared for that. It has to be gear that fits properly, that has been maintained properly so that it will in fact protect you.
I'm speaking from a county perspective. There's been a lot of changes locally with the governing on this COVID money. It's changed tremendously since their last meeting. I know a topic of the next ad hoc meeting is going to be turnout gear and radios for the fire service. Just to put out there, I think as far as grant opportunity, that's obviously her quickness to get something like this funded.
So I'm going to need to grab this call real quick. Hang on just a moment, Otto.
I'll kind of fill in here. Tony, I don't know if you're aware, one of the local departments brought in a quote for turnout gear. I think it was 8 or 10 sets, and they were asked to change the quantity on that to reflect what the county departments would need. And if it was 100 sets is what the number they were asked to quote. I know that's going to be a topic of discussion at the next ad hoc meeting.
Right. If you're speaking of Chief Mallory at Stewartville, he and I had talked. I think he had came to one of the meetings and had obtained some quotes or some pricing on some gear. I'm aware of that, but I wasn't aware of anything else.
Yes, and like I said, even since I think Keith serves on ad hoc, and Mike.
No, I'm not on it.
You're not. The ones that serve on there, that the stipulations on some of that money has changed drastically since the last meeting. It was discussed some in the budget about a week ago.
Right.
And it is Johnny's quote. I know him and Jason Merle have been working on that quote. That quote, to my knowledge, is only for PPE. It doesn't cover anything as far as self-contained breathing apparatus or anything like that. I know there's a great need there as well, probably varying across the county from department to department.
Right. No, there's not a doubt in my mind that if some departments would go back and look at their SCBA and the fact that they need to be flow tested and hydrostatically tested routinely, yeah, there's some deficiencies in that area as well. Bruce said it the best when he first started his PowerPoint presentation. A lot of other industries, the construction industry, a lot of other industries in general industry, you've got administrative controls, you've got engineering controls to protect the employees. But he said it, he hit the nail on the head when he said our first line of defense is PPE, because when you get on an emergency scene, aside from SOPs and SOGs as administrative controls, as far as engineering controls or anything else, those firefighters are relying on that PPE. And that should be a priority.
Hey, Jamie, I'd like to ask you a question. Why are the air tanks not included? Why did we not look to do a bid of everything?
But basically, and I wasn't involved in any of this in the initial process, but basically because they've not been asked for. uh, at the ad hoc level. Now, that doesn't mean any of this would get approved, but it definitely needs to be put on the table because
Now, I didn't
like,
understand, you said that it had not been asked for or had been asked for?
to my knowledge, it's not formally been asked for. I know they're still taking requests and stuff like that, but to my knowledge, it was just the structural firefighting equipment that's been asked for, and that was from Striggersville. I have missed one or two of those meetings, so that could have came up at a different time that I'm not aware of. But if that's not been quoted yet, it definitely needs to be presented.
It was, Jamie, it probably in the ad hoc committee, it probably was not requested, but the commission or the budget committee's been well aware of it. I actually included it in my budget, my proposal to the budget committee this year for an additional $20,000 for capital improvements, and that was SCBA.
I couldn't imagine anyone in this county not knowing that there's need as far as public safety. I mean, communications and safety wise. It's definitely hit the newspaper a lot.
The thing about this ad hoc committee, the only thing they do is make recommendation to the county commission. I would hope that the county commission would look, if it's legal, to add the breathing apparatuses in on this. And I don't know, how does this affect with the cities? Are the cities, of course, they're getting their own COVID money. I know they're probably having to, since they are employees, they are probably having to keep more up to date. Like I wear two hats, an alderman and also, but as far as my view, the city don't need any of this. They got their own, they got to maintain, and they've got money to do it.
Well,
Is the city included in any of this?
I'm not sure. I've had some conversations with current and former members of the ad hoc committee. In fact, our focus was on SCBA's because of the number of cylinders that are out of date. And also we were hoping to get some money to buy cylinders for those 50 mask sets that were donated out of Illinois. So there are one member currently on the ad hoc committee that is aware of the need of SCBA. Folks,
The change to my understanding on that money that's happened within the last month has been initially, in order for this funding to happen, they had to be show a significant loss within the department. Well, obviously our departments are majorly underfunded to begin with. So that was going to be difficult for some of them many of them to show a loss in funding to cover what they needed. But my understanding is they think by the time the final document comes out, that as long as the county can show economic loss, that some of those stipulations will be loosened. And that's all been announced pretty much within the last 2 weeks. The final document, to my understanding, is still not out, but it's looking.
Well, my
like
understanding, Jamie, let me interrupt, but we've got over $3 million that's going to be in our budget as of right now.
Yeah, my understanding is the funding is there, but the final rule is not there yet. Is my understanding from what I
want
understood.
their spending until we get the final rule, because
yeah,
they if you spend it wrong, they will make you pay it out of your pocket.
Yes. There's a lot changed on this money, from what I've seen in the last 2 weeks or so.
Gentlemen, let me slip in here for a minute. We've gone an hour and a half beyond our scheduled time, and our guest lecturer has other things he's got to do. Bruce, I can't thank you enough, dear friend, for your contributions. And we'll probably continue a discussion for a few minutes. And we'll be on board next week at 7 p.m. with you and hopefully Shane Ray. And again, until I get a chance to thank you personally, thank you, dear friend, for your contributions tonight.
Yes, sir. Thank you, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure. Thank you for allowing me to speak with you. And it sounds like you've got a good handle on getting started on some of these things. I will say, I don't miss budgeting, Chief.
Oh, no, it's a thrill.
Yeah, yes, sir. Y'all take care.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Bruce. Well,
Thank you.
hopefully, I don't know, Commissioner Harrell, can you hear us? Mike? Well, I think this has been a good session. I wish that there'd been more of our elected officials on here with us. I did send this invitation to Mount Carmel and Churchill as well. As always, gentlemen, I like to do a round robin to make sure that everybody's had a chance to participate. And I'm going to start up in the left-hand corner with Hal Whedon, all the way from Maryville, Tennessee. Hal, you have anything you'd like to add before we proceed to close?
No, Bill, I appreciate the invitation. It's certainly been an interesting discussion this evening. And just got home in time from work, barely get here, and that's going to go eat dinner.
All right, Hal, we'll see you a week from now. I hope you'll be back with us next week.
Yeah, I don't know about that. We'll see.
Okay. Chief Fugit?
Yes, I appreciate Bruce coming on and his contribution to the meeting. Like I said, I hope the recording comes out great, because all 21 of our commissioners need to understand the pressures that the fire chiefs and the organizations are under to protect their volunteers. We really need to get this word out to all of them.
Thank you, Chief. Director Miller?
I think we've pretty much went over everything. I just definitely wanted to voice that the stipulations on some of that money, as far as what's been said in public meeting, has changed the last 2 weeks. So hopefully as much of that as can be used in public safety will be.
Thank you. Commissioner Gibson?
This has been overwhelming for me. Like I said, I have no background in any of this other than mine and your talk, Bill. And, it's eye-opening. And like Jamie said, I hope some of this money, or a lot of this money, can go to help all these volunteer fire departments. And thank you for what you've done. Now, like I told you earlier, I have a redistricting committee starting at 6 o'clock next week. I do not know unless Jamie's in his office, and I come in there with him.
Okay. Well, appreciate it. Commissioner Harrell, anything you'd like to add? I'm not sure what connections are. Well, gentlemen, I will check and see if we've got the recording for this, and we'll get back and we will make sure I send the information out in advance for next week's meeting. Gentlemen, thank you very much. Stay safe.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you for coordinating this, Bill. Getting the word out there is a great thing.
Thank you, Jamie.